informed the Superior Court that Michael would not be retried. Because of the judgment, the estate would not be able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. So how has this case become in popular court media? Well, it was featured on Unsolved Mysteries. Um, it was in a TV series, documentary TV series called City Confidential. It was also in the premiere episode of it was the premiere episode of Cold Case, and I remember that episode so vividly. But what made me fall in love with the show aside from the flashbacks, it was also featured on the American Court TV. And a Connecticut-born rapper released a song called "Martha Moxley." Even podcasts like Crime Junkie released an episode on this murder as well. Alright, that's it for today's episode. Welcome to the True Crime Lounge podcast. I do have a Patreon that you can join for early access. The episode is scheduled to come out. I also have a merch shop for all your true crime gear. For any updates on my channel or podcast, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. With that being said, let's dive into today's episode. Cold Case was one of my favorite shows growing up. So I decided to talk about cases that the show took inspiration from. The case that we are going to be talking about today is the murder of Martha Moxley. Martha Elizabeth Moxley was born October 16, 1960 in San Francisco. She died on October 19th in 1975 in Belle Haven, Connecticut, at the age of 15 by blunt trauma. She was last seen alive spending time at her home of the Skakel family across the street from her home in Belle Haven. Michael Skakel, who was also aged 15 at the time, was convicted in 2002 of murdering Martha and was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. In 2013, Skakel was granted a new trial by a Connecticut judge who ruled that his counsel had been inadequate and was released on a $1.2 million bail. On December 30th, 2016, the Connecticut Supreme Court ruled 4-3 to reinstate Cackle's conviction. The Connecticut Supreme Court also reversed itself on May 4th, 2018, and ordered a new trial. And on October 30th, 2020, the 45th anniversary of Martha's murder, the state of Connecticut announced that it would not retrial Skakel for Martha's murder. The case attracted a worldwide publicity, as Skakel is a nephew of Ethan Skakel Kennedy, the widow of, you guessed it, U.S. Senator RFK. On the evening of October 30th, 1975, Martha will leave with friends to participate in a mischief night in their neighborhood. Youth and will ring bells and pull pranks such as toilet papering people's houses. Also, according to her friends, Moxley had been flirting with and eventually kissed Thomas, an older brother of Michael, and she was last seen falling together behind a fence with Thomas near the pool in the Skakel's backyard about 9:30 p.m. The next day, Martha was found beneath a tree in her family's backyard. Her family, with her pants and underwear were pulled down, and there is no evidence of sexual assault. Pieces of the broken six-iron golf club was found near her body. An autopsy indicated that she had been both bludgeoned to death and stabbed with the club, which were traced back to the Skakel residence. Thomas Skakel was the last person with Moxley on the night of the murder. He became the prime suspect, but his father forbade him access from going to school and mental health records. Kenneth Littleton, who has started working as a live-in tutor for the Skakel family only hours before the murder, also became a prime suspect. However, no one was charged for decades, and the case languished for decades. In the meantime, several books were published about the murder, including Dominic Duane's fictional account of the case, A Citizen of Perjury, 1993, Mark Furman's notification of murder in Greenwich in 1998, and Timothy Durain's nonfiction A Wealth of Evil in 1999. Over the years, both Thomas and Michael significantly changed their alibis for the night of Martha's murder. They claimed that he had been window peeping and was masturbated in a tree behind the Moxley property from 11:30 to 12:30 a.m. Two former students from Elam School, a treatment center. Sorry guys, there's something on my screen. Okay, anyway, had confessed to killing Moxley with a golf club. One of the former students, Gregory Coleman, testified that Michael was given special privileges and had bragged that he was going to get away with murder. He's a Kennedy. Well, when William Kennedy Smith was tried and acquitted for rape in 1991, a rumor surfaced that he had been present at the Skakel house on the night of Martha's death, with a clear insinuation that he might have been involved. Although this proved to be unfounded and resulted in a new investigation of the cold case. The Sutton Associates, a private detective hired by Rushton Skakel in 1991, conducted its own investigation of the killing, and the Sutton report had leaked to the media revealed that both Thomas and Michael altered their stories about the activities from that night. In 1993, an author, Dominic Durain, who followed the murder actress Dominique Doon, published A Season of Perjury, a fictional story closely resembling the Moxley case. Mark Foreman, 1998 book Murder in Greenwich, named Michael Skakel as the murderer, pointed out numerous mistakes made out during the police investigation. In June of 98, a rarely invoked one-man grand jury was convened to review the evidence of the case. After 18-month investigation, it was decided that there was enough evidence to charge Michael with murder. On January 9, 2000, an arrest warrant was issued for an unnamed juvenile for Martha's murder. Michael Skakel surrendered to authorities later that day. He was released shortly after on a $500,000 bail. On March 14th, he was arraigned for murder in juvenile court, and since he was 15 years old at the time, on January 31st, 2001, a judge ruled that Skakel will be tried as an adult. His trial will begin May 7, 2002, in Norwalk, Connecticut, and he was represented by his attorney, Michael Sherman, and Skakel's alibi said that at the time of the murder, he was at his cousin's house, and during the trial, the jury heard a part of the tape of the book proposed, which included Skakel speaking about masturbating in a tree on the night of the murder, possibly the same tree under which Martha's body was found the next morning. In this book proposal, Skakel did not admit to committing the murder. Prosecutors took the words from the book proposal, overlaid the graphic images of Martha's dead body in a computerized multimedia presentation shown to the jurors during closing arguments. In the audio tape, Skakel said that he was afraid he might have been seen the previous night jerking off, and he panicked. Though the jury heard the whole tape, during the closing arguments, the prosecution did not play did not play the portion of the audio tape in which Shackle had been jerking off, giving the impression that he was confessing the murder. On June 7, 2002, Skakel was found guilty of murdering Moxley, was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. He was assigned to the Gurnall Correctional Institution in Newtown, New Jersey, and the prosecutors used a multimedia presentation during closing arguments, which was included in Skakel's initial appeal. In their brief arguments to that appeal, the prosecution argued that the state engaged in the appropriate and effective advocacy by using trial exhibits to highlight certain evidence and interference. The state's use of audio and photographic exhibits during the arguments was a matter of effective advocacy, and the state did not, as the defendants claim, distort the evidence in any respect by placing certain exhibits near the defendant's words or displaying two related exhibits. So, who was Michael Skakel? Well, Skakel was born September 19, 1960. He was the fifth of seven children. Mm, Sorry, guys, I had to take a bite of my food. He was born to Weston Walter Skakel and Ann Reynolds. And Rushton's sister Ethel is the widow of U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy. Skakel's grandfather George was the founder of the Great Lakes Carbon Corporation. Basically, this kid was spoon fed his whole life. And he was he worked at the coal company at one of the largest and wealthiest private held corporations of the U.S. The Skakel family lived in the affluent neighborhood of Belle Haven in Greenwich, Connecticut. After his mother's death from brain cancer in 1973, Skakel began abusing alcohol. He was a poor student and reportedly flunked out of a dozen schools. He also struggled with 4 years of dyslexia, which went undiagnosed until age 26. Skakel's cousin, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., later wrote that he was a small, sensitive child, the runt of the litter who was with a harsh and occasionally violent alcoholic father who had both ignored and abused him. According to the neighbors, and the family friends, the Skakel children were given unlimited amounts of money and largely unsupervised. In 1978, Skakel was arrested for drunk driving in New York. To avoid criminal charges, his family sent him to Eland School in Poland, Maine, where he reportedly received treatment for alcoholism. He ran away from the school twice before leaving after 2 years. He later attended Curry College in Milton, Massachusetts, and earned a bachelor's degree in English. During the 80s, he attended a drug rehab before initially becoming sober in his 20s. He also pursued a career of as a professional athlete, and he competed on the international speed skiing circuit and tried out for speed skiing demonstration that appeared at the 1992 Winter Olympics in Albertville, France. In 1991, Skakel married professional golfer Margot Sheridan, and with whom he had one child. And Sheridan filed for divorce shortly after Skakel was arrested for Moxley's murder on January of 2000. The divorce was finalized in 2001. What happened post-trial? Well, in January 2003, RFK Jr. wrote a controversial article in the Atlantic Monthly called The Miscarriage of Justice, insisting that Skakel's indictment was triggered by inflamed media and that an innocent man is now in prison. He also argued that more evidence suggesting Kenneth Littleton, the Skakel family live-in tutor, had killed Moxley. He also called out Dominic New as the driving force behind Skakel's prosecution. In July 2016, Kennedy released a book called Defending Skakel entitled Framed. Skakel would then continue to fight his conviction. In November 2003, he appealed to the Connecticut Supreme Court, arguing that the trial court erred because the case should not have been heard in juvenile should have been heard in juvenile court rather than superior court. The statute of limitation had expired on the charge against him and that there were prosecutorial misconduct. And on January 12, 2006, the Connecticut Supreme Court rejected Skakel's claims and affirmed his conviction. Ultimately, Skakel retained his attorney and former U.S. Solicitor General Theodore Olson, who filed a petition for a writ of certiorari on behalf of Skakel before the U.S. Supreme Court on January 12, 2006. On November 13, 2016, the Supreme Court declined to hear the case. In 2007, his new attorneys, Hope Seeley and Hubert Santos, filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus and a motion for a new trial in the Connecticut trial court had originally heard the case, based on a theory involving Jelano Tony Bryant, a cousin of the LA Lakers Kobe Bryant, and a former classmate of Skakel at the private Brunswick school in Greenwich. In a videotaped August 2003 interview with Vito Gallucci, a private investigator hired by Skakel, Bryant said that on the night of Moxley's murder, one of his friends had wanted to rape her. Bryant said that he did not previously come forward because his mom had warned him that, as a black man, he would be framed for the unsolved murder. After 2 weeks, a 2-week hearing in April 2007 allowed the presentation of the hearsay evidence, among other matters. In September 2007, his attorneys filed a petition based on part of Bryant's claim, asking for a new trial. Prosecutors formally responded that Bryant may have made up the story to sell a play about the case. The new Skakel defense team also had a full-time investigative team to review existing and new information, particularly a book written about Elan School. In preparation for the hearing, they argued that the Elan residents who knew Skakel, other than Gregory Coleman, had ever spoken about his confession to anyone, including the author of the book. On October 25, 2007, a Superior Court judge denied this request for a new trial, saying that Bryant's testimony was not credible and that there was no evidence of prosecutorial misconduct in the original trial. His lawyers appealed to the Connecticut Supreme Court on March 26, 2009. A 5-judge panel of the court had heard the arguments of the appeal. On April 12, 2010, the panel will rule 4-1 against his appeal. Skakel had also appealed based on the charges of incompetence about Michael Sharon, his lead attorney in the trial. In April 2013, hearing in Vernon, Connecticut, Skakel testified Sherman, rather than focused on Skakel's defense, instead had basked in a celebrity. He also claimed that Sharon was more interested in collecting fees to settle Sherman's own financial problems than defending him. He would also claim that Sherman testified in defense of his actions while continuing to maintain his beliefs of Skakel's innocence in the Moxley case. Parole hearings would begin. Skakel had been in prison at McDowell Walker Correctional Institution in Suffield, Connecticut. On January 24, 2012, he and his attorneys argued for a sentence reduction, claiming that the case should have been tried in a juvenile court. On March 5th, he had lost his bid for a sentence reduction, and his first parole hearing was held on October 24, 2012. He was denied parole. He continued to deny any role in the killing, and his next parole hearing was scheduled for October 2017. On October 23, 2013, he was granted a new trial by a Connecticut judge, Thomas A. Bishop, who ruled that Michael Sherman's failed to adequately represent Skakel when he was convicted in 2002. Prosecutors stated that they would appeal the decision. John Moxley, the victim's brother, said that The ruling took the family by surprise, and the family hoped that the state would win on appeal. In this ruling, Bishop wrote in defense of such case attention the details of the energetic investigation and coherent plan of defense, stating that the trial's counsel's failures in each of these significantly and ultimately fatal inadequately defense. On November 21st, 2013, he was released on a $1.2 million bond along with other conditions. He was monitored by a GPS service, could have no contact with the Moxley family, must periodically check his phone, and would not be allowed to leave the state unless granted permission. Although he has since relocated to Winchester County, New York. Interesting. In December 2016, the Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated Skakel's murder conviction with a 4-3 majority decision. Winning his conviction was the result of overwhelming evidence presented by prosecutors, and that his legal representation had been adequate. In January 2018, the prosecutors asked the Connecticut Supreme Court to revoke his bail and return him to prison to resume serving his sentence. However, on May 4th, the Connecticut Supreme Court vacated his conviction, ordered a new trial, and the court ruled that Sherman rendered ineffective assistance when he failed to contact his alibi witness, whose name had been provided by Skakel as a result. Skakel was deprived of a fair trial. State prosecutors in Stanford Hall had the power to call for a new trial against him. But let's jump ahead to 2020. As much as we want to forget that year, we just can't forget that year. On October 30th, 2020, the Chief State's Attorney Richard Galangelo informed the Superior Court that Michael would not be retried because of the judgment the state would not be able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. So how has this case become in popular culture media? Well, it was featured on Unsolved Mysteries. It was in a TV series, documentary TV series called City Confidential. It was also in a premiere episode of it was the premiere episode of Cold Case, and I remember that episode so vividly. But what made me fall in love with the show aside from the flashbacks, it was also featured on the American Court TV. And a Connecticut-born rapper released a song called Elizabeth Moxley. Even podcasts like Crime Junkie released an episode on this murder as well. Alright, that's it for today's episode. I will see y'all next time. Y'all have a great day.